Through thick, snow-powdered woods on the eastern edge of town, bright holiday lights adorned fanciful tents and colored booths. Charlie was mesmerized by the sights and sounds as he wandered through the fairground. Tucked tightly inside the pocket of his winter jacket was his dog and puppy-themed wallet filled with his money from chores. He drifted through the crowd as he went from booth to booth. He bought himself a hot chocolate and proceeded to a nearby game booth. Ahead of him, a younger boy threw a baseball at a triangle stack of cones. The grand prize, an elaborate and oversized brown teddy bear wearing a cliché holiday vest. Charlie had been dying to come to the fair, but his grandparents did not have the time or the energy to bring him. So after arriving home from school, he snuck back out and traveled across town. He certainly knew he would be caught if he stayed too long, as once dinner was ready, his absence would become apparent. But for now, he enjoyed himself. He felt entitled to a little joy this year, as it had been a difficult one. This was his late birthday present to himself, as he had just turned 12 just a few weeks prior. But unbeknownst to Charlie, fun, joy, and prizes weren't the only thing lurking within the winter wonderland. He was cold, but the warmth of his excitement burned deep and brightly. He wanted to try and win the teddy bear. He thought it would make a perfect surprise gift for the girl at school he had a crush on. And after watching the young boy's final failed attempt, Charlie stepped up. The fair worker, dressed like an elf behind the booth, smiled and asked if he wanted to try. Charlie nodded as he placed down a dollar bill. The worker slid the bill away and placed 3 baseballs down. Charlie placed his hot chocolate on the counter and stretched his arms. He took a step back and threw his first pitch, low and wide, a complete miss. He winced as he flexed his cheeks upwards in disapproval. The kind booth worker cheered him on. He grabbed the second baseball and inhaled a deep breath before releasing it slowly. He threw and struck the corner of the stack, knocking one of the cones out, which caused another to fall. He puffed with frustration, as 2 cones weren't enough for the teddy bear. The worker placed a lollipop on the table and reassured Charlie. Charlie grabbed the last ball. He focused as hard as he could. He leaned back, cocking his arm, and swung. The ball hit the top cone, knocking it down. Charlie gritted his teeth. The worker asked if he wanted to try again, but Charlie's bruised ego forced him to leave. He grabbed his cocoa and lollipop prize and left. He sighed as he passed through the crowd of joyful families, when in the corner of his eye, a strange man caught his attention. The ringmaster of the fair. He wore a long purple overcoat with spaced white pinstripes and a large black top hat. In the man's right hand, a fancy wood cane with what looked like a polished ruby on top. The man spoke in a loud, cheerful manner, as he seemed to almost dance around the crowd who couldn't resist but cheer in the spectacle. There were other fair workers who walked around through the crowd in different holiday themes, polar bears, elves, and other mythical creatures. But unlike the other entertainers, there was something magnetic about the ringmaster. The ringmaster twirled through the crowd and pulled a stuffed rabbit from his coat and handed it to a young girl. The man leaned down and the young girl hugged him. But as this occurred, the ringmaster's eyes slid up and onto Charlie. Charlie found the sudden glance off-putting and continued on his way to another game booth. The sky started to dim as the early darkness of winter's evenings approached. Charlie decided to play one more game before he had to rush home. He placed what was left of his chore money down on the counter and picked up a BB gun to shoot moving duck targets. He managed to shoot 9 out of 10, which earned him a small stuffed orange and purple cat. It wasn't the teddy bear he had hoped for, but at least he wouldn't be returning empty-handed. He finished his hot chocolate and tossed the empty cup into the trash as he turned towards the exit. He felt envious of the happy families that surrounded him, but he was glad he worked up the courage to come. Even if his grandparents would be furious, he snuck out. He was nearing the entrance of the fairground when he suddenly felt an object block his chest. He looked down and saw a wooden cane with a polished ruby atop. His eyes followed the shaft to a white-gloved hand and onto the ringmaster's face.
"Pardon my intrusion, but may I ask you, young lad, have you enjoyed your visit to our most wonderful of winter wonderlands?"
The ringmaster spoke in a pseudo-joyful way. Yeah, it's great. I have to get home before it gets too dark," Charlie answered in confused attention.
"Say, though, before you return to your cozy abode, what by chance is your name?"
The ringmaster asked as he leaned in closer, the cane still blocking Charlie's chest. Some part of Charlie, though he didn't exactly understand why, felt unsettled by the man. He hesitated but relented and told the man his name. The ringmaster told him to wait as he checked his coat in an exaggerated manner before finally pulling a small piece of paper out and gestured it to Charlie.
"Ah, that most certainly must belong to you then,"
the ringmaster said as Charlie took the paper. Charlie looked down. It was a prize ticket, and written with fancy gold lettering, it said, "For Charlie." Charlie was shocked, but he figured this must have been some kind of parlor trick. Perhaps the man had a bunch of tickets with common names on them that he would magically reveal if someone told him the right name.
"Come with me then, lad. I'll let you cash in that ticket. It's a most excellent of prizes,"
the ringmaster said as he removed the cane and used it to point in the opposite direction of the fair entrance. Charlie paused. It was getting late, and the jig would certainly be up if he didn't start to pound the pavement soon. But the ringmaster's insistence was difficult for him to ignore. Charlie relented, and now followed the ringmaster back deeper into the fairground. The ringmaster took Charlie through a staff-only area to a fancy tent, and used the cane to open the slit and told Charlie to go inside. Charlie entered and was amazed at the pop-up office, which had fancy dark oak furniture lit brightly by 2 oil lanterns.
"Take a seat. This won't take long."
The ringmaster gestured to a pair of wood chairs by a large desk. Charlie sat as the ringmaster slid around the other side and started to search through a big brown bag.
"Ah, yes, here we are."
The ringmaster smiled as he pulled out a silver box. The box had etched inlays of olive branches swirling around its edges, and on top it looked like some kind of ancient rune. The ringmaster opened the box facing himself as he looked up with a strange expression of gleeful mystery. He slid it forward towards Charlie, and then slowly twisted it so Charlie could see its contents. Inside, a silver chain and a purple gem which gleamed from the lantern light. Charlie's sense of concern washed away as he was mystified by the gorgeous chain and gem. "This?" Charlie said, not believing himself to be so fortunate.
"Most definitely. This now belongs to you."
The ringmaster moved the box even closer.
"Go on then. Take your prize."
Charlie's hand extended across the table as he felt the cold chain in his fingertips. He pulled it up and out as the gem glistened.
"Good,"
the ringmaster said in encouragement, but the tone of his voice had seemed to change, from the pseudo-joyful entertainer to something else, to something darker. Charlie pulled the chain in as he stared into the gem. It looked as though the light inside of it pulsed. Charlie exhaled oddly as he felt his eyes getting heavy. He rolled his eyes upwards onto the ringmaster, who had frozen with a vile smirk. "I don't feel good," Charlie fought to force the words out.
"No, not in a long time, Charlie."
The ringmaster's voice now like a ghostly whisper. "My grandparents are..." Charlie struggled to speak.
"Expecting you,"
the ringmaster spoke for him.
Charlie, they don't even know you're gone."
Charlie's heart pounded. but he couldn't keep his eyes open as he slumped and crashed into the top of the desk, chin first. Charlie felt a cold breeze blow past his exposed skin. He reflexively shivered as he realized his winter coat was gone, along with his wallet. He opened his eyes and was horrified to find himself in a large metal cage. He went to shout, but his voice failed, and all he made was a pitiful murmur. He struggled to his feet as he held the metal bars for support. He looked around and noticed he was not the only person locked in a cage. Next to him, a girl around his age. She was crying quietly to herself in the corner. Charlie tried to talk to her, but the moment he made a sound, it caused her to shake and stiffen her grip on her own arms. Near the girl, another cage shrouded in shadows with what looked like a young boy. A fair worker opened the tent slit and walked inside. Charlie tried to talk, but still was unable to. The fair worker opened the shadowed cage and pulled the young boy out. The girl started to shake viciously in terror, though still not making a peep. Charlie could see the boy better as he was thrown over the shoulder of the fair worker, as the boy's unconscious face was illuminated by a lantern. The fair worker left with the boy, not saying anything. Charlie knew this was bad, as he looked around trying to form some kind of escape plan. Charlie could tell by the moonlight that pierced through the tent's opening that it was nighttime. He ran his fingers around the edges of the bars looking for some way out. But Charlie wouldn't wait long, as the ringmaster entered inside along with another worker. They did not speak, but it was evident the ringmaster was contemplating something. The ringmaster pushed his cane into the ground and placed both his hands atop the ruby as he tilted it left and right repeatedly. Charlie watched his cold eyes shift back and forth between the girl and himself. The ringmaster made a frustrated sound and slapped his thigh with his right hand.
"Oh, I can't decide. Let's do both,"
the ringmaster said as he gestured to both cages with his right hand. The worker who was with the ringmaster clenched his teeth and shifted his jaw forward and to the side, clearly irritated. But his face returned to normal as he walked over and unlocked the girl's cage. She shook viciously as the worker scooped her up and flung her over his shoulder. Charlie and the girl looked at one another in terror before her long dark hair covered her eyes as she was taken away. The ringmaster walked closer to Charlie's cage. He leaned forward, examining Charlie with a gross self-worshipping grin. He tapped the ruby of his cane on the metal bars before turning and exiting the tent. The worker re-emerged and opened Charlie's cage. Charlie stumbled back, trying to will the strength to fight back, but his wobbly legs and arms easily crumpled as the worker grabbed him and threw him over his shoulder. Charlie could tell immediately that it was near midnight by the moon and how dark it was. The cold air chilled his exposed arms as the man carried him out into the center of the now empty fairground. He was brought back to the ringmaster's fancy tent. Inside, Charlie saw the girl on the table curled defensively into herself. The worker flipped Charlie off his shoulder and sat him in a wooden chair. The worker pulled out a handful of a strange powder and blew it into Charlie's face. Charlie coughed and tried to rub away the powder, but his ability to move had become further diminished. The worker turned and left. The ringmaster entered as he rubbed his two white-gloved hands together. He pulled his gloves off, revealing pale and almost blue skin. He leaned forward and brushed the girl's hair away from her face, as he seemed to be smelling her. He went behind the desk and grabbed each of her shoulders and squeezed tightly, pulling her up into a seated position facing Charlie. The young girl's eyes looked at Charlie helplessly as she squirmed in pain. The ringmaster's gripped fingers now digging into the girl's skin as blood formed around them on the girl's pink cotton shirt. The girl moaned but barely made a sound, just a horrible, shallow breathing. And suddenly, a bright purple light bloomed in the dark tent. Charlie leaned back into the chair, desperate to move, but he felt as though he was pinned to it. Behind the ringmaster, a loud crunch echoed as long, ethereal, crystal-like, translucent purple spider legs emerged and spread. The ringmaster rose up higher as the rest of his wicked spider-like body formed. The ringmaster's human form now just a dangled sack of flesh which hung like damp laundry on a clothesline. The only part that remained was the ringmaster's head, which smiled at Charlie. The ringmaster's flesh hand still stabbed into the girl's shoulder as his lower jaw broke apart and split sideways, revealing long needle-like teeth. The girl was yanked back as the ringmaster lowered his maw around her head. The ringmaster reveled in the moment as he slowly clamped his jaws around her skull as his teeth dug into her. Her face contorted as her eyes rolled back and her jaw broke. Charlie looked back and away as he heard the distinctive crack of her skull splitting and the sound of munching. Charlie cried, struggling to move, as he tipped his chair backwards and fell to the ground. Charlie rolled, trying to produce forward movement as he listened to the loud sound of the girl's body being decimated and devoured.
"Going somewhere, Charlie?"
The ringmaster's voice echoed. Charlie heard the ringmaster slowly skittering towards him as the desk was pushed aside. Charlie started to crawl forward as he saw a large, glowing spider leg stab the ground ahead of him like a spear. Another of the ringmaster's 8 legs flipped Charlie on his back as Charlie's eyes opened wide in terror. The ringmaster was nearly the size of the entire tent. As Charlie saw, he was right atop him. Along the ringmaster's head by the back near his neck, 2 long dagger-like teeth chittered together. The ringmaster's face had returned to his horrible grin as he enjoyed savoring Charlie's fear. The once dangled skin suit now wrapped underneath the monster's abdomen, leading up to its head which retained the human shape. The ringmaster spun a silken rope and tied Charlie's feet together and pulled him back to the middle of the tent. A worker re-emerged and said something, though Charlie was unable to tell what. The ringmaster crunched and twisted back to his normal human form and left the tent. Charlie crawled back towards the big brown bag, searching for a weapon or a means of escape. Inside, he found a long knife, and he pulled it out. He was still struggling to move, but found himself slowly regaining his strength. He cut into the purple binding by his ankles, but it was incredibly resilient. Finally, he freed his feet and crawled towards the back of the tent. He cut into the fabric and made a hole he could fit through. He forced his way through and crawled outside, making his way to the woods. Charlie had no idea how long he had before he was noticed missing from the ringmaster's custody, but he knew he needed to get as far away as quickly as possible. He crawled through the cold, dark, and snow-powdered dirt. He jabbed his hand on a twig, which splintered and snapped off into the palm of his hand. He cried as he huffed and puffed, forcing himself further into the woods. With each passing minute, more of his strength returned, fueled by his desire to survive. He grabbed the trunk of a tree and pulled himself to his feet. He hobbled along, faster than his crawling. Charlie was now deep in the woods, with no real sense of direction or any idea of what to do other than to just keep making distance. His hobble turned to a walk, which now turned to a slow jog. But Charlie heard a screech, which echoed through the woods. He heard a loud gust of strong wind as he saw a purple glow shoot across the sky. He hoped the tree line would obscure him, when suddenly, a man shot down to the ground ahead of him. It was one of the fair workers. The man looked furiously at Charlie as he clenched his fists. Charlie went to run away when huge bat wings, transparent and crystal-like, which dimly glowed a vibrant purple, shot from the man's back. He used them to blow a gust of wind into Charlie, knocking him off his feet. The man lurched forward, stomping towards Charlie. Charlie twisted and looked up at the man's face, who had vampire-like purple glowing fangs poking out from under his top lip. The man closed his bat wings around Charlie, preventing escape. The man stopped and looked up into the sky. He seemed confused, as if he was trying to detect the source of a sound Charlie could not hear. But soon Charlie heard it too, a whirling mechanical rumble. Bright white lights flooded into the woods as a stack of 4 military Black Hawk transport helicopters roared overhead, passing right over them. The man retracted his wings and grabbed Charlie, covering his mouth. A twig snapped. The beastly worker quickly grabbed Charlie's right ankle and snapped it before discarding him off to the side as he faced into the dark woods. He wanted to ensure Charlie would be incapable of attempting another escape. Charlie's voice had returned as he wailed in agony. Another twig snapped as the worker growled. A sudden burst of light as multiple flashlights illuminated the man. He shot out his wings, which stretched across the opening in the woods. Charlie looked up and saw at least 8 people clad in dark tactical gear, holding kitted-out rifles at the worker. Another helicopter roared past as Charlie heard distant gunfire. The worker screeched and blew his wings forward and back as he charged the armed people. They opened fire, cutting the man swiftly down. Charlie thought they must have shot him near 100 times as he watched the beastly man's body roll, which spilled glowing pink and purple blood. The dim glow of the man's monstrous wings seemed to grow darker before entirely fading away. One of the uniformed people walked up to the monstrous man and shot him once more in the head. Charlie suddenly was blinded by 2 flashlights. He instinctively held his hand up to cover his eyes. He could hear them approaching, along with the sound of more distant gunfire coming from 2 different directions. They saw Charlie was bleeding and lowered their rifles, though 2 of the people stood at a semi-ready position as if guarding Charlie from escaping. One of the armed soldiers walked up from behind the 2 guarding Charlie and leaned down. He couldn't see their face, just their eyes, piercing blue, as the rest of their face was covered by a black balaclava. The woman spoke softly to Charlie, telling him he was safe now. On her vest, he saw the letters ARC.